everybody. Good evening. My name is Levi. I manage the artist residency programs here at Jack Straw. We're really happy to have you here. I want to start with a reminder that we're meeting on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. And the staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw acknowledge that we're living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea. And we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. And one tool that I find useful for finding out whose land you're on, if you might be watching from somewhere else, is a website called Native Land, native-land.ca. I recommend learning more about the people whose land you're on. So yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you to our wonderful Jack Straw writers and our curator, Claudia. Our engineers, Daniel and Aisha, who are handling the tech side of things. This is the third night of a series of 3 readings. If you're just joining us, the other 2 you can find on YouTube. One slightly edited version of last week's reading and the complete reading from the first night. And then also the writers will be going out in the community over the course of the year. I think you'll hear a little bit more about that from Claudia. So keep your eyes out and your ears out. We'll also be having podcasts featuring interviews and readings with all these writers. All of this is possible because we get funding from the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, and individual contributors. And we appreciate all of those individual contributions. Everybody who was able to give tonight, we appreciate that. And you can go to our website and click donate to find out more about that. If you're watching from somewhere else and you'd like a copy of the anthology that probably almost everybody in here is holding in their hands that they got when they came in the door, there should be a link to buy that at Open Books. And if you just are here and want to buy more copies, if you're not, later, you can go out to Open Books, and they also have previous years, and we really appreciate their partnership as well. With that said, I want to hand things off to our wonderful curator, Claudia Castro Luna. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third and final reading of the 2026 Jack Straw Reading Series. This reading marks the culmination of 30 years of this program's existence. Just think of that. 30 years in a row we've had this gathering where we hear the writers who are the writers in the Writers Anthology for that year. I think that is an amazing mark, right? And I really wanted us to acknowledge that with a round of applause, because that's a really huge feat. Yeah, thank you. There is not a lot of organizations with that kind of, life, right? That kind of longitude that Jack Straw has. And when you look at the writers who have come through this program, when you look at the archives or when you read, the publications, it's quite a stunning list of people here. In the Puget Sound region, in the Northwest, actually, because we've had writers from Vancouver, BC, we've had people from Portland, we've had people from Eastern Washington. I mean, we've had people from all over. I think Kathleen Flanagan, yes, your cohort had folks from other states, right?
Well, anyway,
Canada, yeah. So it is a enormous thing, and I wanted to take a minute just to consider that in terms of what nonprofits do and are able to do, and the stamina they have to put together year after year a stellar literary program like this one. Gratitude goes to John Rabinovitz, Jack Straw's executive director, and to all of the staff, past and present, who have nurtured this program, which is truly a gem of Seattle's literary scene. Thank you to all of our supporters, and Levi mentioned the organizations who fund us, but also individuals like yourselves and institutions who sustain the work of this amazing organization. Thank you also to the board of Jack Straw, and we have a member of the board, Kathleen Flanagan, in the room, who is a board member and also has been a curator of this program. Were you also a participant of the program, like myself? Yeah. So the whole thing, from participant to board member to curator, I think that's amazing. Huge thanks to Daniel Gunter and Aisha Ubayat Tilaka for engineering tonight. And also, because this is the last evening, I want to thank Tony Williams, Seos Green for engineering during the taping of our podcast, and to Carlos Nieto for his sound editing, which he is doing. And we will see the results when the podcasts are released. And I also want to acknowledge Levi, who just left the room, because I really wanted to take a moment and we'll do that when he comes back, because he runs this whole program and many other things at Jack Straw with efficiency and enormous grace. And I'm so appreciative of all he does for Jack Straw. And so I wanted us to acknowledge him, but he probably went to take care of somebody at the front. So when he comes back, we'll give him a round of applause. Writing is about heart and mind. Often in literary circles, the mind is emphasized. We talk about craft choices, editing, and more editing, and references, all kinds of thinking pieces that go into a piece of writing. And of course, that is really important. But we know that the heart, or that heart, is central to the enterprise of being a writer and of writing. Without heart, there would be no writing, in fact. A poem is feeling first, right? A poem is not craft elements first. A poem is a sensation or a feeling or a need to articulate something that comes from very deep, before words, actually. It manifests before there are words. And the effort of writing a poem is that translation that happens of putting that which we are feeling or moved by into words. So let me find it. The tug of wanting to express a deep emotion or wonderment at the ineffable. No one teaches us how to feel. We are human. This faculty is already installed in us when we come into the world. Left unmentioned, but equally important to writing, is courage. The courage to summon oneself, to put to paper our tenderest self, the most exposed, vulnerable, afraid, troubled, at times defeated self. That is an act of courage, as is also to recover again and again from the inevitable rejections and to return to a desk after a difficult writing session. And who among us hasn't had one of those where you feel really maybe defeated by the page, and yet you go back to it? There is a lot of world and a lot of courage in the pieces we're about to hear tonight. Tonight's writers have ties to all across the globe, from India to the Tigray region to Canada to the agricultural heart of California. I said there is a lot of courage in writing, the courage it took the writers to pen their contributions to the anthology, and the courage of the protagonists in these stories that we're about to hear. All of the readings tonight center girls and young women. The stories trace the complexities and vulnerabilities of girlhoods, complicated by extraordinary historical and social circumstances. I salute the young protagonists in these stories and the writers who have brought them to light. I'm really looking forward to this last reading, which I originally had titled Girl Power for these four pieces we're going to hear. And Levi, would you mind coming into the room, because you ran away and we want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you do with such grace and just incredible efficiency as well. So we appreciate you and your work. So our first writer of the evening is Sayantani Roy. Sayantani hails from the Bengal region in northeast India, and the project she's working on at Jack Straw centers stories from her native Bengal, including stories about the Bengal partition, which directly affected her own family, to the current mass exodus of rural and small town Bengal to large cities in India. As Sayantani notes, quote, displacement is the through line that weaves these stories together, and the stories revolve around loss and gain attained through those experiences. Sayantani's stories are stories of place, of the way politics entwine and sometimes arrest personal trajectories. There is bravery and verb in her characters, you will soon hear, clarity and delight in the assured hand who writes them. Sayantani is a passionate K-8 educator and English for Speakers of Other Languages volunteer. She's an MFA candidate at the Rainier's Writers Workshop, and her work has been published in the Amethyst Review, Ekphrastic Review, Emerge Literary Journal, Full House Literary, Grist, Heavy Feather Review, McQueen's Quinterly, and West Trestle Review, to name a few. Let us welcome Sayantani Roy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the reading tonight. I thank Jack Straw for this incredible opportunity. It has been a unique experience to work with the sound engineers and the voice and performance coaches. I truly admire Jack Straw's emphasis on disseminating content through audio media. For one, it is such an important step toward making content accessible through this modality. Thank you to our wonderful curator, Claudia Castro, for your warmth and generosity and the sheer excitement about our work. Your enthusiasm seeps into us. Thank you to Levi Fuller for everything, including looking at this piece that I'm going to read with such careful eyes. Thank you to my cohort for being there for each other and for taking such interest in each other's work. Your support has been invaluable. And heartfelt thanks to my MFA mentor at the Rainier Writing Workshop, Aram Rijoyan, for helping me sharpen and give shape to this piece. The story I'm going to read is, of course, set in small town in West Bengal, and it is from a time period, I'd say around the late 80s, when technology had not made its big entrance in these places. So even amenities like a television, a fridge, or a landline phone, these were considered luxuries, and only a privileged few had these in their homes. So just wanted to mention that. All right, here it goes. The Steal. Your mother owns the embroidery business, doesn't she? From his trimmed mustache and absence of a paunch, so common in men in this town who eat, drink, and chatter away their time, I think he might be an outsider. He has caught me at an awkward moment, and I mentally hasten Shamkaka to put the sanitary pads in the black plastic bag. I snatch the bag, hand over the money to Shamkaka, and step off his sharp stoop without waiting for the 2-rupee change. Wait, Cookie, Shamkaka calls out, but I yell back and ask him to adjust next time. Wait, the man calls after me as I pick up a brisk pace. You haven't answered me, Tia. I stop and look at him and then lower my gaze. He's a good-looking man. How do you know my name? I draw small arcs on the dust with my chappals. My feet have dry, white marks. It's late January, and the sun is mellow and sweet. Everyone knows you, Tia, especially after that big win last season. He's a flatterer, but I fall for it. And I think you know my younger sister, Aparna? I couldn't quite place Aparna, but he keeps talking in this soft, pleasant manner. She's getting married this spring, you might know. I was hoping your mother could design the sari for her. He holds up a big shopping bag. Tell you what, I'll give you the material now and make a payment shortly. Aparna talked to your Pishi last week. I suddenly recall that Pishi and Aparna went to the same college before Pishi dropped out. When he hands me the bag, his fingers brush mine, and that tingling feeling I've come to know as desire travels up my hands to my insides and spreads across my chest and stomach. I'm Rupam, by the way, he says. The sun is directly above me, Shonibar Barbella, the high noon of Saturday. I'm not superstitious, but I already know nothing good can come from this. Embroidery business indeed. I smother a smile as I watch Ma and Pishi sprawled on the bed, stitching flowers, paisley, and mythical animals onto a diaphanous material that's probably a wedding sari in the works. Ma is proud of these orders. People refer to this enterprise as tailoring, an inferior trade, and Rupam is the only one who called it by the name it deserves, even if the title feels grand given how little money it brings in. I hand the bag to Ma. More business, I tell her. So, Aparnadi is getting married? I look at Pishi. That's almost all your batchmates now. Ma glares at me, and Pishi has a pained expression which she tries to hide by bending over a peacock's plumage. Pishi is 25 and would have been married off by now had my father not left us in debt. Our handloom business ran into trouble in last year's monsoon when the small factory flooded and the looms became non-operational. He died of a heart attack not long after, which Ma once blamed on me in a fit of rage. I had failed in the 10th, and if I didn't come through this year, there was little hope for me of getting that government job all promising athletes aspire to. How was I supposed to get anywhere without private tuition? We had no money. Pishi had passable looks, her assets being a cascade of hair and her sweet voice, but we had no money for her trousseau or dowry. My father often lamented that he had the burden of marrying off 2 daughters, not 1. Early morning, I go to the club court to practice my dribble when no one is there. After my dad died, I chopped my hair off, which was long and wavy like Pishi's. I wear the most loose-fitting clothes I can find over the tightest bra that flattens my chest. I wish I didn't have to wear that short skirt. During our practice, idlers lurk around the court, sometimes in groups, elbowing each other and sniggering over what we think are comments about our anatomy. Complaining about it draws unwelcome attention from the club personnel, all men, except our secretary Devjani, who once played for the district and was now a far cry from the slim woman she used to be. The new girls, Beena and Najma, reported to us that when they complained to our coach Shorinda, his eyes darted all over their bodies before he dismissed them. Most girls from well-to-do families have cut their ties with the game. Substandard, they call it. Business owners and government officials are sending their children to the city to train, or they're moving there altogether. Our town will soon be wiped off the map. Our coaches aren't trained, and our equipment is inadequate. Occasionally, we are joined by some officer's child on vacation. Sometimes it's the district magistrates and local lawyers' daughters who come at their parents' behest, but always leave within a few weeks of having gained that novel life experience they were looking for. Lately, I've felt a rage that travels through my chest and arms and sits on my fingertips. It's like a petulant child, and to appease it, I've begun to steal things. I steal what others hold dear, especially things I can never have, and from those that I feel don't deserve them. I don't keep them for myself. Instead, I destroy them or throw them away. I'm careful, but the other day, when Mina boasted about her gold-plated pen, I stole it from right under her nose. I got caught, though. The tallest boy in our class sauntered toward me during recess. Tia, what's that shiny thing in your sock? His knowing smile told me he was waiting for the right moment. In the empty classroom, he struck a tacit deal and shoved his tongue inside my mouth, his hands rough and probing. And then I meet Rupam. He's rich and pushing 30 to my not quite 16, but young love is willful and without reason. Rupam drops by on a Sunday afternoon to make that payment he promised. He comes without notice, and Pishi bolts off to the other room. I'm splayed out on the floor trying to cram for a geography exam. As I quickly gather my books, Rupam laughs and asks me if I knew where Honolulu was. A smile begins to form, but I hide it because Ma is watching with hawk eyes. Pishi is back, her hair smoother, a bit of coconut oil on her chapped lips. Ma asks after Aparna, reassures Rupam that the sari will be delivered on time. Pishi is quiet. Aparna and Pishi weren't close, that much I know. Aparna had her own clique. I'm watching Pishi now, from behind the doorway of the other room. Rupam is Pishi's age, slightly older. And when I see how Pishi twists her aanchal between her fingers and glances at him from under her lashes, my heart crashes against my chest wall. Pishi, my sweet aunt, but more like an elder sister. I love her the most, more than my parents, more than my friends. But I couldn't bear it if she stole Rupam from me. I forget that Rupam is less than a kernel of a fantasy, a gossamer figment. Things move so fast after that, I lose track of the days. I keep busy with tests and games, but Rupam's thoughts consume my days and I fare poorly in both. He works in the city, but I see more of him now, as if he's decided to linger more at home. Our eyes lock in crowded places, and while he sometimes gives me half a nod, he doesn't approach me. The day I hear that his mother paid us a visit, blessed Pishi with a gold chain, and that Pishi is now betrothed to Rupam, I am so shocked I forget to cry. No dowry, no trousseau needed, she had said. My son adores the girl and that is enough. Ma imitates her and giggles, which is so out of character for her that my anger, which had lain dormant for some time, bares its teeth and drips its foul slobber. I want to steal Pishi's gold chain, throw it away so that she will be thought of as ill-fated. But as I study her face one evening, I have a better idea. When she's out of earshot, taking her bath, I tell Ma to ask Pishi to return her gold bangles. Return? Ma is startled, scolds me harder than I expected, puts her hands to her ears and shuts me off. I grab her hands, pull them down. You must listen to me, I hiss. She will be the well-to-do one. You will embroider her saris now. Don't you see? There goes your business partner. What will we eat? Those are Grandma's bangles and Pishi is not of this household anymore. I dare you to reclaim them for me. At this, Ma looks at me as if I were a fiend, not someone who came out of her. But when Pishi appears, a thin towel wrapped around her freshly washed hair, face dewy, a safety pin in her teeth, Ma does my bidding. Pishi nods, turns around, and I follow her into the bathroom, which smells like her sandalwood soap. She lathers her hands and wrists, and with some effort pries the bangles out. She washes them gently and presses them into my palms. Bodhi didn't have to ask me, Tia. They were your grandma's, and now they are yours. Her grace only fans my anger. In the following days, Rupam visits when Ma isn't around. I avoid his eyes, but I can feel them on me as he comes and goes. When Pishi and Rupam spend time in the inner room, I turn the radio up high and try to shut out images of them holding hands, caressing each other, and doing all kinds of things that I can only vaguely imagine. But lingering there, with only a wall between us, brings me a kind of perverse pleasure I didn't know I could bask in. In the passing weeks, I grow bolder. When Pishi isn't looking, I meet Rupam's eyes unabashedly as he does mine, the undercurrent more delicious than any deluge. We seem to play a game where we make up the rules as we go. That day, he forgets his watch on the dressing table. Pishi notices it right away. Run along now, he couldn't have gone far, she pleads. You go, I tell her. But of course she can't. The wedding is only months away and she can't be seen outside with him. This wasn't the city. I take the watch and sprint lightly. Instead of calling out to him, what do I call him? Rupamda? Uncle? I clear my throat and he does an about turn. It's dark outside, and his eyes gleam as they bore into me. Suddenly, it's the two of us under the fragrant blossoms of the kamini, and he's cupping a hand under my chin, whispering to me, "You're so pretty, even with your boy-cut hair." And as he lifts my face up, his arm grazes my breast ever so lightly that maybe I imagined it. But I pull back, push his hand away, and run back to the house. I shut the main door behind me and put the deadbolt in place. Pishi watches my actions and then gently reminds me to disengage the deadbolt. Bodhi will be back any minute, she says before going inside, and I stand there, still holding Rupam's watch, now warm in my hand. For days, the aftertaste remains. Nothing changes for anyone else. I'm scared that Rupam will call the marriage off, but everything moves along in a neat, prescribed channel. I've lost again, but what's new? Only this time, the losses are many, and I can't decide which one hurts the most.
Thank you so much for that beautiful story, Sayantani. Let's give her another round, yeah? It's such a hard ending to that story, but the whole thing is hard. It's just really wonderful, constructed. Thank you. Our next reader is BeeLyn Naihiwet. I hope I said that appropriately, sort of, yeah. BeeLyn is a Tigrayan American poet and a mental health therapist. She has 2 books of poems, Plenty and Moonful, both released from Finishing Line Press in 2021 and 2024, respectively. Her poetry appears in the Coeli Journal, the Halcyon, Mom Egg Review, Ginosco Journal, among others. BeeLyn is a wonderful poet, and I encourage you to seek out her work. It is really wonderful. But to my surprise, her submission and her work with Jack Straw is not in poetry, but in prose. So she's really writing into a new space during her residency. Her prose pieces capture what to some may read as unimportant quotidian events, but to her are the distillation of what it means to be human. and this is what caught my eye in BeeLyn's submission to Jack Straw, that the pieces that she was, they were very short prose pieces, captured everyday moments in such a tender and in such a tender way, but with it's like with such attention and care that you and a soft voice that I felt myself in the room, in the rooms that you were describing, and I love that about your writing, BeeLyn. Her stories tell of for instance, her stories tell of immigrants who have escaped the horrors of war, making new lives in a new country. And through her keen observations and artful prose, we witness the struggles, the joys, the surrenders, the contradictions, the epiphanies, all the remarkable things that happen every day and that make up our lives. In BeeLyn's own words, quote, "This project is an exploration of how we become who we are through the accumulation of small, often overlooked moments. This project is an exploration of how we become who we are through the accumulation of small, often overlooked moments. At the heart of my work is attention to perception, to the nuances of experience, and to the quiet currents that shape identity. Writing is for me both resistance and grounding, a way of transcending pain while remaining fully present in it. Language becomes a vessel through which I explore the complexities of human life, the intersections of memory, grief, joy, and the ongoing work of becoming." Let us welcome BeeLyn.
Thank you so much. So I am BeeLyn Naihiwet, and as Claudia mentioned, my writing project for this program is about becoming. And I first imagined it as a reflection on the lessons I learned on the road to womanhood, beginning at age 17, which was a kind of fateful year for me. But as I wrote, an even younger self kept insisting on herself until I finally listened. So this is Summit. Decades later, I found myself in front of the apartment building I lived in as a kid. I had thought of this return for years, but could muster neither enough hope nor hopelessness to brave it, having spent my life in the merciless middle of both. Unexpectedly, it was motherhood that made my return possible. Raising my daughter necessitated my reflecting on my own childhood, a journey that inevitably led me back to the apartment building on Summit Ave. The building had occupied my mind so thoroughly that I had convinced myself it was in a different part of town. Driving up Capitol Hill that day, I was struck by how completely I had relocated it in my mind. The winding avenue, the cross at East Howell Street, even the parking spaces had all been rearranged in willful, desperate avoidance. The ivory 5-story building now looked worn, though not beaten. Rust gathered along the railings as if bearing witness. The paint peeled in a patternless pattern. It looked stronger in the way survival hardens. My eyes surveyed the fractured bricks around the barren, might-have-been garden out front, untended, unviable, and impossible. I was reminded of a deserted Eden, once abundant. For years, I thought of Summit Ave as the origin of split, life before it and life after it. Summit, the word itself, followed me everywhere. At times, it accused me of abandonment. At others, it challenged me to face that all the running I had done and continued to do would eventually culminate in having to accept that the highest point of my life was not ahead, but behind me. At its sharpest, it taunted me. No matter where I escaped to, I would always be confronted with the size and significance of Summit Ave. The large windows of first floor Unit 110, which had once housed our lives, were now directly to my left. I turned my head slowly, taking in the dirt and discoloration on the glass. My soul recognized itself in the building's decline. Peeking through the dark blinds of our old unit, I could slightly make out stacks of huge boxes and piled furniture. It resembled our last days there. I walked over and stood before the black iron gate. Its sun-like pattern radiated from a circular dark center, a keypad lock set in the middle where the two halves meet. I stared at it in fateful reunion. The gate seemed designed to be less a barrier than an altar. It was more expectant than I remembered. When my hands touched the chipped paint of its bars, my body registered a familiar sensation and stood at convicted attention. It was this gate where I first truly understood the limitation of being human, that no matter how hard I willed it, I could not keep my brother and sister from proceeding toward and through the gate. I had objected with not a word, but a siren of a sound. That sound traveled through time to my ears, and I felt my legs root to the ground as the building began to circle me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 11-year-old me, mouth open, backpack slipping off one shoulder, moments before she reached the gate. A dark cloud of knowing hovered above her head. By the time I managed to force my legs in her direction, the cloud descended and swallowed her. I could see her eyes thrashing inside her head, searching for cover. As the scene sharpened, the details of that day in March seemed to break free. As early as I could remember, my mind had shown a propensity for escape to more tolerable realms, engaging in fantasies that restored a sense of agency and choice. I don't trust myself to stay in reality, a kind of flight that sentences me to resilience and return. I had long been burdened by how much I can survive, how indifferent life itself can be to what shouldn't be bearable and yet is, and how guilty I feel for my capacity to endure devastation. I am acutely aware of feeling betrayed by the way my body continues to carry me and cover up my internal damage. I subconsciously look forward to aging, an anticipated reconciliation of my external and inner selves. My return as an adult was always more likely. Back then, in March, a family friend had arrived to take my siblings and me home early from school. The school phoned home to confirm the release, and I was happy to go with him. In the back of his car, I asked few questions, too relieved to leave school, where I was regularly bullied for my broken English and apparent unbelonging. After a while, a familiar dread set in. The driver was silent. I braced myself for another of my father's attempts to manipulate us into living with him. Despite our choice to stay with our mother, an arrangement he was intent on changing. His most recent tactic had been to show up at our home unannounced for family mediation meetings with Tigray community members who were already impressed with him. By then, my young body had already survived a brutal war, refugee camps, and a bitter disillusionment with the racist reality of America, but navigating my father's control proved to be hardest for me. On the ride home that day, my older sister and I quickly reaffirmed our shared choice of parent. Our younger brother looked out the car window, making silly, strange noises, oblivious to our hypervigilance. His strong attachment to our mother, combined with my father's too often attacks against his would-be manhood, meant there was little risk he would be persuaded to live with him. As soon as the car was put into park around the corner, my siblings jumped out and started walking down Summit Ave toward our building. I followed slowly, practicing my courage to withstand the guilt and punishment that followed when my father didn't get his way. I checked for his black Ford among the cars and didn't see it. The man who had driven us stood outside the car, patting his pockets in a distracted manner, reluctant and unsure. A flash of intensity gripped me. My chest caved. I could hardly breathe. I watched my siblings' backs moving toward the gate and knew the world was about to end in an instant. I shrieked a warning. If you keep going, our mother dies. We must stay on this side so she can live. But the pain intercepted the sound, swallowing my cry. My words reverted to a piercing feeling that made me dizzy. The ground rose beneath me as I struggled to catch up to them, to shield them from what I knew and had always known. Time stopped. Everything became highlighted and clear. The chilly air, the shining sun, they seemed almost summoned for this moment. The moon, who had kept me company all those years of fear, was absent, an objection to the shattering ahead. Finally, I reached them at the gate and grabbed a bar to steady myself, the metal hot to my cold hands. My siblings turned to me. "Stop," I pleaded. But the gate flung open, and there was our father, who should not have been there, his lips moving, his presence unnatural. Nothing good for our mother could come from his mouth or hands. He was an inappropriate messenger. Senselessly, he cried, "Your mother is dead, your mother is dead." I backed away from the gate, away from his terrible words, but they followed me into the street and back into my mother's womb. The inescapable words that had shaped me and my life from that day forward came back to me at the gate. They settled on my skin, and a shiver ran through me. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. My shoulders shook with the grief and pain that rose from deep within. When I leaned my head against the iron, my memories merged with it, and a wail pushed itself out of my throat. My bones dissolved as my body slid down the gate to the ground. I lay there in mourning, spent. I had spent so much of my life running from this building that it never occurred to me that it might offer me rest. I had feared that returning would expose a failure, a detail I'd repressed too well that would destroy me upon its resurfacing. In many ways, the day I lost my mother, I lost myself. My mother died on the 3rd of March, and I became a third of myself, one of 3 of my mother's children. The shared trauma of her death bonded my siblings and me to an inexplicable extent. She lives and dies again every time we're together. I continued to follow them into the rest of our fractured lives, trying to protect them from any further horror and harm. Threat became so familiar, I accommodated it. I also knew that, though my mother had been dead longer than she had been alive, a part of me had never truly accepted it. I searched for her in everyone and everything, sacrificing pieces of myself to maintain connection. Mine was a prodigal daughter's return, having squandered potential, trying to make a mother out of the missing. I collected myself and rose. I surveyed the building once more, walking toward where I had earlier glimpsed 11-year-old me. She would not reappear. When my heart broke at the thought of not seeing her again, I didn't run from it. In that sharp stillness, I realized that returning to this building wasn't about reclaiming, but releasing her. I finally let the terrible words in. My mother is dead. My mother isn't somewhere. She isn't away. My mother is dead. I pressed a hand to my crumbling heart until it steadied. This was reality. I could stay in it. I stepped out to the sidewalk and looked around Summit Ave. Across the street, just to the right, another apartment building caught my eye. I drew closer and read its sign, a new Summit. Standing there, I felt the weight of every yesterday since I followed my siblings toward the end of the world. And for the first time, I could see beyond it.
Thank you so much, BeeLyn, for the courage to write what you did and for sharing that with us this evening. I appreciate that. Can we give her another round? That line, how much we can survive, really stood out to me. In reading your story, although the story of my life as an immigrant child who fled war resonated with me, and that idea of how much we can withstand really has stayed with me. Our next reader is Natalie Pascale Boisseau. Natalie Pascale Boisseau is a bilingual Quebec writer from Montreal living near Seattle. She's currently at work on 2 projects: the autofiction novel Exiles and Desire, which explores feminine spaces through generations and the occupying voices that suppress, ignore, or distort them. And, Exiles and Desires received support from For Culture in 2023 and centers Violet, a 13-year-old girl who lost her mother to suicide in a suburb of Montreal. The second of Natalie's ongoing work is a collection of essays titled To Arrive Where My Mind Lives, which is a collection of reflections made while on road trips through North America. Describing her own work, Natalie Pascale writes, quote, "My work stems from being an explorer in the landscape of trauma, as it is experienced by women one generation after the other. I am interested in how healing takes place close to the wound and how migrations carry the burden of unresolved sufferings." Let us welcome Natalie Pascale Boisseau.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Levi and Jackstra's team. Thank you to my cohort writers who, with your support and inspiration, really got me going in a way. And thank you to all of you being here tonight. So I would like for you to read, to listen gently, because some of my writing that I will read tonight evokes or mentions suicide and trauma. I will be bringing forth Violet, the main character, in my new autofiction novel. Originally it was a memoir, a hybrid memoir, and then it changed. And it's floating a little bit between the two, so that's the process of writing. And there's a second narrator, which is the narrator of the present time, the Violet of the present time. So I will read actually the beginning of what I published in the anthology, so the opening. The title of that piece in the anthology is called Beginnings. And I realize there's different beginning, and it's not a linear, when we work with trauma or explore it, it's not linear. So there's different possibility for beginnings. So I wanted to share that one. When someone asks me at 63 years old, how has grief shaped you? I sense the 15-year-old steers in me like an unhappy sleeping dragon. Unhappy to be pulled back into the long road full of holes of grief, the road that started one time ago when no one knew how to hold, to speak to a daughter who just lost her mother to suicide. This girl is nodding and says to me, perhaps you could do the talking, the writing for both of us. She would rather be left alone, sitting on a thick blanket in the shade, her back against a maple tree. There's a book on her lap, one of Virginia Woolf in French, Orlando, or an autobiography by Angela Davis, also in French. There's also a book from Agatha Christie with Miss Marple's character investigating, ready to offer advice with a cup of tea. This is her freedom, going from one world to the other to meet new friends and revisiting old ones, feeling welcomed in the midst of the story. She feels exhausted, almost offended to be reminded and pulled back in the everlasting path of her sorrow. When will she be ready to speak of it? Instead, she discovers lavender, the scent rising in the warmth and the sunlight buzzing with bees, the green cover of clovers and their pink pompons nodding in the salty breeze of the St. Lawrence River, so wide, where the shore across becomes a thin horizon. Each time she looks into the soft patches near the beach paved with pebbles, she finds a four-leaf clover. She explores the sand and pools at low tide, wading in the crust where tectonic plates grate on each other. She is careful to place one bare foot in front of the other and avoid the sharp edges of rocks barely covered with gray sand. She returns from a dip with raw and wet sand on her feet, crumbling on the soft blanket. The cold water ridge is so far where the tide is low, pulling the river away, smelling of sulfur. This is my grief, she wants to say. This is my sorrow. She invites me back to the shores of the wide river of her adolescence, and as she senses me arriving, growing closer into her story, she smiles, blinking in the sunlight. She says, please tell me what it is you would like to know. Can you repeat your question? The second excerpt is, again, different beginnings, is from Mississippi Year, Yellow and Blue, where we encounter a younger Violet at 5 years old with her family in 1966. The first color I see when we move to the coast of Mississippi is yellow, jaune, we say in French. Yellow, like my mother's joy, like the dress she has sewn for me that I wear now at 5 years old. The sunlight is hot and everywhere, even through the woods wrapped together in lianas of Spanish moss. Sun rays pierce through, sharp like my mother's gaze. When I look, squinting my eyes, the sky, the water, and the sand on the beach become white. Everything is almost white under the sun. When coming together, the yellow of the wildflowers and the blue of the sky become green along the roads. People forget it, says my mama, but when we live in a big forest of live oaks, never bare of leaves, even after people came to cut a lot of trees. In spring, the tight little buds push out the old leaves, oval and pointy, and the older leaves fall one by one. They become brown cushions on the ground to walk softly, barefoot. The air is humid and sticky near Pascale, named after the river, named after a tribe, a place of mosquitoes and moccasin snakes, of ocean and bayous and marshes, of old and new brick worlds. My hair, that my mother keeps short to my constant dismay, is a frizzy brown nest inviting birds with familiar French names like Héron, Pélican, Aigrette, and also others like the Napoleon seagull, a kind of mouette. When we play outside, clouds of insects swallow me raw, so I swat them around with my arms and have to keep moving, wearing my mother's shoes, too big with pointy tips and long skinny heels digging in the sandy ground. I walk funny in the new grass, trying to escape the clouds of insects biting my white flesh, blotched with red swan bites, and my two brothers laugh and laugh. It's a wetland in the back of our house. I want to kick the shoes and run away to the neighbors behind their house and jump in the water. But my father says, careful, there are alligators in the bayous. We have a white and black television, and I sneak out of my bedroom at night when my parents watch to listen around the corner of the hallway. On the news, there are people marching, there are fights, white people beating black people. It scares me. I know my mother is scared too. She says to my father, how can we live like this? I cannot hear my father's voice. I hear my mother again, her voice rising in the night. All this violence, the injustices, can you not see this? When I silently return to my bedroom, I knock my knee on the threshold of the door. Threshold, a new word. A bruise appears, yellow and blue. The spirits of all the people come out at night on the beaches of Biloxi and Pascale, in the forests of live oak, where the Spanish moss hang from tree to tree. They still speak to me at night when I lay awake, looking at the stars in the changing purple, dark skies. I hear their whispers in the wood of old oaks tied together, streamed by sunlight, as I listen and see with the fierce gaze of my mother, my ancestor. This third excerpt is from The Crossing of Desert, and here we encounter the narrator of the present time. As my wife Ellie and I arrive at the campsite at Goblin State Park, Utah, the wind greets us. It's an expanse of minerals sparkling in the light. The sun is shining in my eyes, itchy with sand and blinking constantly for moisture. Heat is all around us. The San Rafael swell is continuous, a vast plain dotted with juniper trees, peeling their bark, some with dead, amputated arms, others offering short leaves and blue fruits, dispersed scrubby, twisted trees respecting each other's shade. Rising from the desert are formations of mushroom shapes akin to goblin creatures, layers of rocks shaped by water, many floodings which dissolve salt, deposits and minerals, hoodoos, pinnacles, alcoves, arches have resisted erosion. How to survive in the desert? Ever since the suicide of my mother, I often felt my life has been a crossing of deserts, learning to survive with little moisture, my roots stretching at the surface, sensing for what is safe, what is moist. I could never quench my thirst for something I could not name. Did I also learn to rely on cycles of dry cold at night and dry hot at day, between sudden seasonal monsoons that flood the arroyos, Spanish name for the prints of waterways that become dry washes in the deeper gashes of the land? For our first night in the desert, Eli and I resigned ourselves to sleep in the back of the SUV on an inflatable mattress, losing its air, with our 3 dogs. All day, the wind has been blowing dog beds, towels, plates, all our small belongings, and will blow our tent as well. Sand enters my shirt, my shoes, my eyes, my nostrils, and my mouth when I speak against the relentless sweeps of wind. All night, the wind roars and shakes the SUV at unpredictable pace. After getting up the 3rd time for the restroom, the only modern facility miles around, I cannot find my shoes. I tuck behind the back wheel. The wind has blown the underneath of the car clear of any debris. In the dark, bare feet, the sand is soft but also tricky. How to avoid small pebbles, sharp twigs, or sleeping scorpions. I fight to return to the car, holding onto the side door. And through the night, I keep my body still, but my mind is restless, full of tense knots and worries. I let them rise, and the shock waves of the wind take them like it took my shoes, blowing my mind clear until a new knot tangles itself again. My thoughts do not have content, but textures of sadness, anger, anxiety, loss, different voices of different ages, and other voices too, intruding, not mine. And the wind blows each one by one, chipping at the walls inside me, crumbling them with force. And I let it, taking one breath at a time, the thin moisture of my breath dissolving in the night, taking and offering soft breaths, every sensation exposed. A quietness settles when I finally surrender more and more under the gusts of wind shaking the car. The landscape is alive, forcing its invisible inhabitants inside. It is fiercely seeking a connection with my imagination, creating monsters and dissolving them into fine grains. The practice of softening of my breath becomes gentle, loving. My body relaxes. In the middle of the endless night, I sense my mother whispering soothing words with no sound, like the invisible traces the wind left earlier in the day. What winds leave after their passage. In the night of desert, I find my mother, her lineage through me, freeing the parts that are crushed but not really erased, like grains of sand. I am now attracted to the whispers entering the car, stronger. Who my mother has been when alive is what the wind leaves for me, entering every part of me, releasing all my joints. It reawakens me, moistens me. At sunrise, we wake up from the thin hours of sleep. The sky is blue, cloudless. The air is calm, cooler. I stand on my bare feet, taken by the immensity. The desert owns me, holds me, teaches me. I become shaped by water, the passage of water, the dissolution through water, the flooding of water. Deserts hold spirits, and I hear the word ancestor with different sounds, alive. In this immensity, grateful, I find the threads of my mother lineage in me. So writing about trauma, I was told by a mentor of mine, they're dear to my heart, there's never a day off with trauma. So writing the project, and especially the piece in the anthology, I had to take pause at times and find guidelines for myself, for the writers, for the characters, and perhaps for anyone with whom this could be a benefit. So it's a poem that I'm going to end with, and it's titled Guidelines on Writing the Wound, Writing the Scar. Before I know the wound, its depth, its painful, gapping, bleeding power, before its ripples urge me to come close to its fire, to the edge of its live crater, to jump off the cliff and engulf me, I need to know healing. How to bathe myself, how to bathe and cool my wounds, my scars with milk and honey, as the sages have pointed out a long time ago. It makes sense, finally, when it enters my body, a self-love making I slowly recognize. Nervously, when approaching the full lips, the borders of the scar, I wonder, is it a healed scar or is it still a wound, an unsealed wound? Exploring its ridges from within, from the warm and moist center of me, filling me, then I remember, I learn, I return, I remain in the ancient loving shores of me.
Thank you so much, Natalie. That was beautiful and so inspiring. Thank you for your courage to go there for us tonight and to invite us to reading that opening, that beautiful opening of your piece in the anthology as an invitation for folks to finish it at home. And for bringing the other gifts that you brought. It was wonderful. The last piece was terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we give her another round? Oh, this is very sad because we only have one more reader, and then that's it for the May reading series this year. So our last reader of the evening is Jean Ferruzola. During her time as Castro writer, Jean has been working on her second manuscript, a young adult novel set in California's San Joaquin Valley. The story revolves around a 17-year-old girl, Xiomara, or Zia Castillo, who's still grappling with the disappearance of her older sister, Esperanza, who vanished one night in their small agricultural town of Mesa Verde. Jean herself comes from the area in California where the story is set. I'd like to share Jean's artist statement for Jack Straw, as I think it best captures her current work. Quote, in the past decade, I've shifted my focus to writing towards young people, especially those standing at the intersections of language, family, and identity. As a first-generation American, I grew up between two cultures, one spoken in my home and one outside it. The tension and tenderness between those worlds shaped how I saw everything, from belonging to love to self-expression. My writing often begins in that space of in-between. I'm drawn to characters who feel the friction of translation between languages, generations, or expectations, and the quiet resilience that emerges from it. At core, I aim to write stories that make readers, especially young readers, feel seen and less alone in their contradictions. Let's have a round of applause for Jean Ferruzola.
Thank you. And thank you again for everybody for coming, and thank you to family and friends watching on the stream. Hi. So as Claudia said, I'm going to be reading from my novel, in progress. And the story is really about two sisters. Though Esperanza, she returns and reappears suddenly 4 years after her disappearance. Though she's alive, she's fundamentally changed by that time. And though she doesn't remember exactly where she's been, the things that she does say about that time become increasingly more surreal as time goes on in the story. The excerpt in the anthology details the lead up to her sudden reappearance, but tonight I'm going to be reading an excerpt that's set a little bit later after she's already been home for a month or so. And in this excerpt, the family is still trying to understand what's happened to her and how to care for her. And their mother, who is desperate for a familiar solution, decides to take them all to church. And it's the first time that Esperanza is seen in public since her return, and the first time that the family has to really face the town again together as a unit. So we'll meet them on that day. When I step into the living room, Esperanza is already dressed. Mama's work is everywhere. The green dress, the careful makeup softening the bruised shadows beneath her eyes, the faint smear of gloss. Mama's gold hoops hang from her ears, delicate and bright, trembling slightly whenever she moves. She looks luminous. For one breath, maybe two, I forget what's happened to us. She looks like the old Esperanza, or some memory of her left out in the sun, a shimmer of who she used to be standing in our living room. She catches me staring. Her mouth curves in a small, soft smile. It's so familiar that it hurts. Then, just as quickly, the light goes out of her face. Her eyes glaze over and drift down to her lap, fingers twisting her skirt into a tight little rope. Not her then, not yet, not all the way. My eyes move past her, and the next shock hits so hard I almost say something out loud. Papa is standing by the door in his Sunday clothes, pressed slacks, polished shoes. I haven't seen him wear those clothes since the day Esperanza disappeared. Not on holidays, not when Mama begged, not even when her crying got quiet, which was somehow worse. Eventually, I stopped going too. To see him like this feels like betrayal, or worse, surrender. He clears his throat. Ready? None of us answer, but we follow. What else can we do? We pile into the truck with the old choreography of a family pretending it remembers how to be one. Mama takes the front seat. Papa drives. Esperanza and I sit in the back, separated by a strip of cracked vinyl. She stares out the window, tracking the rows of fields as they pass, dirt brown and endless. The silence rides with us, taut as a held breath. After a while, my mind slips into another morning, another version of this same back seat. Back when Esperanza and I rode to school together. On foggy mornings, Papa would drive slower than usual, both hands on the wheel, the tires whispering over the road. The fog in Mesa Verde could get so thick, the whole town was erased by it. Sometimes school was canceled and sometimes it wasn't, and on the mornings that we had to go anyway, Esperanza and I would press our faces to the cold glass and invent things in the white. Monsters mostly. Not the ugly kind, the lonely kind. Long-necked things beyond the veil, winged things folded into ditches, girls with no faces keeping pace beside the truck. We gave them names, we gave them voices. Esperanza always made hers tragic and beautiful, and I always made mine hungry. It was noisy work, but I remember the hush of it, the milky, cloud-thick quiet, the way the world disappeared by inches, roads first, then fence posts, then fields, until the truck felt less like a truck than a small boat drifting through nothing. Inside the fog, we were completely unmoored, but we were not alone. Esperanza, Mama says softly from the front seat. Remember, mija? If you want to leave at any point, you tell me. We'll come back to the car. We'll go home. Esperanza flinches. It's small, but I see it.
a flicker through her shoulders, there and gone. I can't tell if it's annoyance or something else. Fear, maybe. Embarrassment. The terrible exhaustion of being handled gently by everyone all the time. We pull into the church parking lot just as the sky lets go. Rain speckles the windshield, soft at first, then steadier, tapping against the glass like fingernails. By the time we get out, it dapples our shoulders and darkens the dust on Papa's truck. We hurry towards the doors with our heads ducked, all of us as one. A hush moves through the church before the doors even close behind us. Heads turn, whispers rise, quick and low. At the altar, Padre Morales is preparing for Mass. When he sees us, his expression shifts. Surprise first, unmistakable. Then something softer takes its place, something so practiced it almost passes for mercy. He meets us halfway. I'm so glad to see you, he says to Mama, his voice low and warm, and the whole family, too. His eyes move briefly to Esperanza. To his credit, he tries not to stare, but everyone wants to see the wound, even holy men. Please, he says, find your seats. We're about to begin. We settle near the back, where no one dares sit too close. A few people make a show of shifting their purses or gathering their children nearer, pretending they are only making room. Still, the whispering gathers around us, thin and bright, cresting like a tide before the bells ring and call the room to order. Padre Morales raises his hands. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo, everyone answers as one. Amen. The Mass goes on, but my mind slips loose almost immediately. I am sitting closest to the windows, where rain beads against the colored glass and turns the saints' faces watery and strange. Beside me, Mama sits with her hands folded hard in her lap. Prayer is posture. Prayer is restraint. None of us has said it out loud, but I know why we are here. Because of what Esperanza said at dinner. Because the center of the earth, that was where she said she'd been. And the unsettling thing is, I'm starting to believe her. Padre Morales' sermon washes over me, words rising and falling without landing. Sin, mercy, faith, return. Every so often one of them snags, and I glance towards Esperanza to see if she heard it too, but her face has gone still and far away. Somewhere in the pews, I spot a few kids from school trapped beside their parents. They steal careful glances in our direction, trying to look without being caught looking. My ears burn. I used to think the town wanted Esperanza to come back. Now I think they only wanted a clean ending. Time slips sideways in this awful limbo, and then somehow it is communion. The pews shift and sigh as people rise. The line forms slowly, bodies shuffling into the aisle, hands folded, heads bowed. Mama nudges me forward and slots me behind Esperanza. The incense has grown thick and sticky in the heat of all those bodies. When we reach the front, Esperanza kneels at the altar rail in front of me. Her hands are clasped so tightly her knuckles gleam white. Behind us comes the low rustle of breath and fabric, the whole town pretending not to watch while watching with every inch of itself, waiting to see if she can do this, if she is really better, if the rumors are true and she has come back different, marked. Padre Morales approaches her. His face is composed, all gentleness and duty. His voice is soft when he says, El cuerpo de Cristo. Esperanza opens her mouth, barely. The wafer touches her lip. For a second it catches there, impossibly white against her mouth, and Padre Morales reaches forward to guide it between her teeth. It is the same motion he has done 1,000 times before, the same small act of trust. Esperanza snaps her jaw shut. It's not a bite, not exactly, not at first. It's more like a flinch, a startled animal motion, so fast it seems to happen before thought. But there is a sound, a sharp, wet gasp from Padre Morales, and then a thin line of red opens bright across his thumb. He jerks back. The chalice slips from his hand. The clang of it against the marble floor cracks through the church. And for one suspended second, no one breathes. Esperanza does not scream. Her face does not twist with fear or guilt or pain. It wavers with something stranger, something almost blank. Confusion, maybe. Wonder. As if she is as surprised as anyone to find blood there. She opens her mouth as if to speak, but no words come. Only the thin, white scrap of the host softening on her tongue and that tiny, terrible shine of red. Mama shoves past me. Mija, she whispers, already pulling Esperanza to her feet. Mija, come on. Padre Morales presses his bleeding hand to his vestments, muttering, it's fine, but he won't look at her. He won't look at any of us. We leave quickly. By nightfall, everyone in town will have a version that Esperanza bit him clean through, that she spat blood onto the altar, that the chalice cracked down the middle like even holy silver could not bear to touch her. Someone will swear her eyes went black. Someone else will say they saw the host turn to ash in her mouth. No one will tell it straight. Not in Mesa Verde, where memory warps under heat and the better story always outlives the truth. Outside, the rain needles down in a fine mist. Behind us, the double doors of the church ease shut with a hush. For one brief second, there is only the rain, the parking lot, and the gray sky pressing low over the hills. Then the talking begins inside, low at first, then rising like a hive shaken awake. Mama reaches for Esperanza. Mija, I'm fine, she snaps. Papa fumbles with the car keys. They slip through his fingers and strike the pavement with a hollow clatter. He mutters a curse and bends to grab them, but not before I see his hands. They are trembling. Papa is afraid. The sight of it knocks something loose in me. Papa, who stood stone-faced while we passed flyers door to door. Papa, who seemed entirely made of silence and anger and bone. Afraid. We pile into the truck. I slam my door too hard. The engine grumbles awake, and in the rear-view mirror I see the church doors open again. People pour out in clumps beneath the rain, umbrellas blooming black and blue over their heads. Near the entrance, the boy lifts his phone. He tries to hide it against his jacket, but I see the bright, cold eye of it, recording. My chest aches. Not only with embarrassment, not only with rage, something more tangled than either. A wild, almost maternal urge rises in me to shield Esperanza, to tuck her somewhere no one can point at her, pray over her, record her. But beneath that, beating hard and fast, is fear. Not of what happened at the altar, of what might still be happening, of what might be taking root inside of her, slow and secret, of whatever she carried back from the place she said she'd been, the center of the earth, the dark, the impossible. The two feelings knot together in my ribs until I can't tell one from the other. Love and dread, as inseparable now as blood from water. And I knew then that whatever had come home with Esperanza had come home to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And thank you for reading. I feel like I'm reading this book little chapter by chapter. That was really great. Let us give her one more round of applause. And we have come to the end, but not quite, because we have a surprise for you tonight. brought by way of Maya Marino, who read in the first of the 3 readings. Maya, the first time we met in this room, as it often is the case, the first day all writers show up and meet each other, she proposed a project with the number 12 in it. And we ended up, because of her energy and leadership around it, we followed through. So we're going to read the project that we ended up writing collectively. So this is a group poem. So this is a community effort. But I wanted to read you a little bit about Maya's idea around the number 12 and how she came to this idea. So she writes, "The theme I'm interested in pursuing and continues to nag at me is the number 12. This idea holds significant intergenerational importance in my family. It is also the year I moved to Washington and Mount St. Helens erupted. The idea of 12 runs our lives, from the hours on the clock, months in a year, astrological signs, 12 sets of ribs, and I'll add 12 writers in a Jack Straw cohort, and the number certain sports fans in this town carry on everything from sweatshirts to pens to glasses to all kinds of swag. So we would like to read for you our 12th poem, which we titled The Spring and Swirl of You. And the way the project worked was that I, as the curator, was asked to come up with a phrase, which then reverberates throughout the poem as the poets use the phrase to come up with 12 lines in this poem. So The Swirl and Spring of You is the title. The swirl and spring of you, delight of delights, hatched.
The swirl and spring of you yelps, Alamon, Alamon, leaps and coils around our poem.
The swirling and the springing green, always the truth of you, well wishes a soul spring in bloom.
Proprioception, stepping into your inflection, the swirl and spring of you.
The swirl and spring of you, weaving the fiber of our fingers outstretched to the new year.
If there are poets around here, I would like to ask them if words don't have a spring and swirl inside them. What is it that keeps them alive?
Throwing phones into fairy wakes, the spring and swirl of you.
Your evening of a voice, setting me into the swirl and spring of you.
The swirl and spring of you threads into a necklace inconsequential moments of the day.
The swirl and spring of me, unfurling the growing sharp scales and soft skin of my dragon.
Caught up in the swirl and spring of you, I tumble, I soar.
The swirl and spring of you hangs in the grove, all bruise and gold.
Bravo. This is complete experimentation, and Levi was very kind to let us go along with this project. So the poem is in the last page of the, I should have said that, it's in the last page of the anthology, if you'd like to look at it again. I will say that, of course, this is only the beginning of an amazing year for the cohort. There are many readings that will happen. The next one is actually quite amazing, and it will be, let's see, words and music from Jack Straw writers at Northwest Folklife Festival, and that will be Gabriela, Maya, Kevin, Natalie, and Ruthie will be reading at Folklife, and in real time, a musician will respond to their composition. So this is writing and music. It sounds amazing, and that is the 24th of May at 1:45. So I'm sure that this is posted on the Jack Straw website if you want to have more information. But we also have in June, readers will be at the RASP reading series in Redmond. Then throughout the summer, there'll be 2 readings at Hugo House, 2 readings at Elliott Bay Books, and other readings that will be announced throughout the year as the year moves along. So check with your folks, with your friends, and look at our website. We'll post all of these readings. And with that, I have to thank you once more for joining us. This concludes the 30th year of the May reading series at Jack Straw. A huge thank you to to this year's writers, and for you for joining us here and online. Thank you so much. Thank you.